Just get back to picking this thing.
So Chris, what I was going to do is just that we want to be there.
Test. So it's, I have to be, test, no? Feel like I'm a rock star here. Maybe that goes.
Chris and I bought and I can look at the chat.
Yep.
All right, I'm gonna go ahead and get us going, guys. Oh, sure, we're not getting any reverb, we're good. All right, welcome everybody. Happy Friday, the 7th. We are getting ready to start our special city council meeting for Trailhead discussion pursuant to Governor Inslee's Order 20-25-12 issued January 11, 2021. Local governments in phase 2 must allow persons to attend public meetings remotely, provided, however, the proclamation further allows in-person meetings under limited conditions in addition to remote public meetings. At the present time, due to the commission's required to hold in-person meetings, the City of Liberty Lake will continue to hold all public meetings remotely. We have been able to secure a facility today so that the council can meet in person with proper social distancing. We are also already tuned in on our computers, so you can catch them. So I'll do a quick roll call, and then we'll go ahead and turn it over to Katie after that. So, Councilmember Woodruff.
Present.
Oops, he's got a speaker on it, I don't know.
Excuse Councilman Dunn.
Councilmember Kennedy has moved to excuse Councilmember Dunn and seconded by Councilmember Stever. So we will excuse him until he arrives a little later due to a work conflict. Yeah. So go ahead. All in favor of excusing Councilmember Dunn, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, excused. All right, so at this point, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Katie Allen, our city administrator. She'll go through, take a look at the agenda after she reviews it. Mayor Pro Tem, if we can have you move the agenda after she does a quick review. And I apologize, we are going to be passing the microphone around today. So appreciate a little grace from our audience. Thanks.
Thank you. And what we don't have on the agenda is public comments, so we will be monitoring the chat. And before you approve the agenda, you might want to make a motion to add public comment. The other thing I was going to mention is that one of the things that we tried to do in putting the agenda together for you was determine what do we want to leave today with. And so if you look on your agenda, there's a section called goals. And if we don't have those right, you know, very much want to get the feedback from the council. If there's something you want to leave the council, this retreat with that we haven't listed, and I'll go over what those are. We want to leave this retreat knowing what the project is. We refer to that as scope. What is our budget? And I'm not talking dollars and cents, but orders of magnitude. And Chris is going to have some information he wants to share with you to help you with kind of identifying the size of project that we're looking at. then how are we going to pay for it? So Kyle is going to play a key role in that. And then what is the schedule? And that's really totally all up to you. Is there anything else that you'd like to add to the agenda? And then, Mayor, I just want to thank the council for taking a half-a-day Friday, a beautiful day in Liberty Lake, and spending it here at Medwood Tech, and thank Greenstone for providing the facility so we could have a face-to-face meeting.
Thank you. Probably here, so. Thank you, Katie, and Madam Mayor. Make a motion to make an adjustment on the agenda that we had public comment.
What number at the end?
That would be item number, let's pick item number 7.
Yes. Are we allowed to make? There's no actions. I know that came up in our last one.
Right.
And I know he's also in favor of Bob's rules, so I have just adding some comments. Is that then
So therefore I make a motion that we add a public comment.
your second?
Okay.
Seconded.
Then I also make a motion we accept the agenda as proposed.
Okay, we have a motion, the vote. We have approval to approve the agenda as amended. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any other? Thank you. I think my mind that I want. I think the vote, the request is to approve the agenda. Vote on that.
Absolutely right. Oh, you're right.
Yeah, I also don't want to get too bogged down. So, okay, so all in favor of adding the public comments to the agenda? Say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, and all in favor of accepting the amended agenda? Say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Thank you, Mayor.
Okay.
Okay, so in addition to Chris putting together a wonderful PowerPoint, I also wanted to recognize Todd and Kate for the lunch and Todd for the technology. And so now Chris is going to share with you his ideas and suggestions, and then certainly answer any and all questions.
Just remember, really passing the mic around when the time comes. So please, you can raise your hand. So you want to.
Okay, thank you for having me. Just wanted to go over a few of my thoughts on Trailhead. We've been working on this for a while and had lots of meetings and committee meetings, and tried to get it down to help out with maybe some of the decision making. For those of you that don't know me, we can do the other slide. Thanks. Chris Johnston, I'm the head golf professional at Trailhead. This September, it'll be 10 years that I've been at Trailhead. I've been a golf professional for 28 years. I've been a PGA professional for 24 years. And actually next year I'll become a lifetime member of the PGA, which just means that I'm getting older. So I've actually won 4 Merchandiser of the Year awards, and 2 of them in that little pro shop at Trailhead. So thank you. Thank you. The last job I had before I came to Trailhead, I was the GM. I ran the entire facility. I was in charge of the restaurant for 6 years, the superintendent, maintenance, and golf shop. And then when the job opened at Trailhead and I wanted to take a little step back and maybe not have as big a role, I was fortunate to take the job at Trailhead. And now it's the longest tenure that I've had at a golf course, and love it. So next. So just to kind of let you know a little bit what's going on at Trailhead right now. I just put the last 5 years up. This is just our first quarter from January 1st to April 30th. It kind of fluctuated through the last 5 years, and then we had a little bit of a dip there at COVID because we were closed for 31 days. And then you can see the big spike this year.
The whole
Oh, how do I move that over?
Want to make sure you see that big spike. There you go.
Thanks, Todd. So obviously, a little bit of this is COVID. Last year, I was personally worried a little bit when we closed down, didn't know what was going to happen to golf. We got lucky that everybody that was staying at home actually came out to play golf a little bit more. They only had chances to do things outside. When we were closed that 31 days, like I said, was a little bit worried about what was going to happen with golf. And then we were a little worried about what was going to happen in 2021 when people started to go back to work, or maybe they decided that golf wasn't fun anymore. Well, that was completely changed this year. So we've almost getting pretty close to almost doubling what we normally do. Now, we couldn't anticipate that at all. So it kind of hit us pretty fast. And that number right there for 2021, the range was also closed due to the wind damage for 53 days. So we lost a little bit of revenue there. But the good news is it looks like some of the people are staying around and playing golf. I did have a meeting the other day with the ladies club, and there was 6 new ladies, and I asked them why they joined the club. And 5 of the 6 said that when COVID hit, they were sitting at home and thought maybe I should try and do something outside. And then once they tried golf, and they loved it, and now they're a member of the ladies club, and that's the kind of people that we've got hooked on golf again. So it's been a huge resurgence in golf. So this is the last 8 years. RJ and Kyle worked pretty hard to figure out what the exact expenses were at the golf course. It's always been a little bit of a challenge to figure out, since we do a little bit of dual duty on some of the equipment and some of the labor. The biggest thing for me is when I started in 2011, my goal was to see if I could make the golf course profitable, because that's not always what happens at golf courses. And since 2013 to 2021, it looks like we're actually going to double our revenue, which is, in my opinion, fantastic. As far as expenditures are concerned, in 2020 was the first year that we were able to pass the expenses with revenue. Do you want me to read to you?
Well, you can just repeat my question.
Sure.
I know we've discussed in the past that, and you said that we work hard to get the actual expenses. Is this for the budget, and we have to consider the parks and maintenance people as on top of these expenses, or does this include that?
That includes it. So that's the number that Kyle and RJ were working on for me, is to get the percentage of what they actually work on the golf course. And this is in there, from what they're telling me, this is the actual expenses of the golf course in the last 8 years. So for me, I hit my goal there in 2020. Now, of course, a little bit of help from COVID, but we were also closed for 41 days during that time too. Okay, so we're going to the next slide. So for the golf course itself, what do we need? First thing we need is a golf course, which we have. A golf shop, a driving range, a practice area. The practice area that I'm referring to is over by the little house next to the driving range. Cart storage. We have 14 carts right now, and we regularly run out of golf carts, but we don't have enough storage area to be able to have other golf carts. A meeting or flex space. We have a banquet facility downstairs, but it's not adequate for what we're trying to do for the golf course. A restaurant, just a form of food and beverage. And then winter revenue, which we have a little bit right now with our covered and heated driving range, but that could improve also. And then adequate parking, which is one thing we're missing over there. If you were at Trailhead the last couple of days, there was people parking across the street at Albertsons because there just wasn't enough room for just the restaurant and golf course alone. So after going to all of the meetings and looking at all of the material, these are my suggestions. I came down to 2 options. The first one I call is above the hill. And what that means is, if you can see this is my crude drawing, by the way. But if you see the white line that goes all the way around from the street all the way to the bottom of the hill over to the Arboretum and around City Hall, that's the part of land that I'm talking about. It's a little over 12 acres. So that's what I'm considering above the hill. And I'll get a little bit more into it later, but that option is somewhere right now with the numbers that Staples Golf gave us, between $7.5 to $9 million. So So what is option one? Option one is basically to keep what's not broken, exactly what we have now: a golf shop, a driving range, a practice area, cart storage, meeting space, a restaurant, and then adequate parking. Basically just upgrading what we already have. And this model is proving successful right now. As you see from the revenue trend, without adding any more amenities, this model is working. We just have a building that's a little short of 50 years old and some netting on the range that is starting to fail. It has this option has less impact to the golf course, meaning that we're not going onto the golf course to change things on the golf course. We're staying above the hill, which is like I said, just the parking, the building, and the driving range. Less impact to the business revenue, and that's because we don't have to, in this option, we don't have to close the golf course at any point. If we kept the golf course open and we were building a building or doing the driving range, we could be in a trailer in the parking lot if we needed to, which a lot of golf courses do when they're building clubhouses. And then this doesn't have any additional outdoor activities. It's just fixing basically what we have right now and upgrading what we have right now. The potential in the future for future space and size of potential for indoor winter revenue, simulators, and then enhancing the indoor and outdoor space. Right now, probably the most popular place at Trailhead is the Planque deck. And if we had a little bit bigger space of that, it could be really good. And then just preserving Trailhead as it is right now. So the next one is the campus option, and this is, I'm calling it the campus option. I didn't really have a good word for it, but the picture doesn't quite show all of it. That's just my bad PowerPoint, trying to get the whole picture in there. But this is from Staples Golf. This is when they were trying to think outside the box for us. This is where the driving range actually moves down below the hill. Go ahead and choose them. And that's between 9.5 and 11 million. And I'll get into that a little bit closer, but yeah, next slide, please. So this is adding new amenities. It's a more of a campus park-like setting. It's a attachment to City Hall, meaning it's all one. It takes the golf course, Trailhead's clubhouse, and attaches it to City Hall also. It has extras. They had pickleball in there. They had a putting golf course. They had an outdoor amphitheater. Snag golf is a kids golf course. A pond, places to sit around the pond. And this is my opinion. It's an unproven business model. There's not another golf course that I can think of that when they're building the golf course and a clubhouse that they're adding other amenities like pickleball. And I think in their drawing, they had an ice rink. And so just golf itself, like I said, it's unproven. I don't really have any other examples of that. It doesn't mean that there's not cities that have those amenities close by, but it's not something that they're building right at the golf course. So it has the added outdoor amenities. Those added outdoor amenities, or additional outdoor amenities, we can only use for 5 to 6 months. It's nothing that we can use in the wintertime unless possibly there was an ice rink. It has more impact down onto the golf course because of this. Because of those added amenities, we don't have enough room. We only have that 12.2 acres. So the only thing that we can do at that point, and what Staples Golf had, was to move the range down onto the golf course. So once we do that, we have to change some of the holes on the golf course. And so that's the impact. There's not a lot of irrigation changes from what was already, our new irrigation system. There's not a lot of changes there, but we're talking about quite a bit of space between what the holes number 1 and number 9 would have to be changed completely. So you'd be moving the range to accommodate the new amenities and activities that would have been on top of the hill. More impact to business revenue while constructing, because if we're doing that, then we have to close the golf course during that time. So it's loss of revenue. And then the last part would be the additional staffing for more activities. If we add pickleball and we add things that we need to staff, or we need to rent rackets out to, or whatever it may be, it's going to require more staff on my part. When I started in 2011, we had 7 people working in the golf shop. And today I have 8 people working in the golf shop. And our revenue has doubled. And so now if we start adding more amenities, the labor is definitely going to keep going up. Next, please. These were concepts. I don't know if anybody saw them or if everybody saw these, but these were the concepts that Staples Golf came up with. This was the rendering of the clubhouse. There are more examples of this on section 5 I have on here, section 5, pages 7 and more. I just picked 3 of them. This is the north elevation of the clubhouse. It has all of the essentials that I talked about. It doesn't add anything extra. It just has exactly what we have, but makes them all better. That would be from the parking lot looking at the golf or at the entire building. And then the 2 on the bottom, one is the one on the left is the meeting flex space. And then the one on the right is the restaurant, outdoor seating. Next one, please. So this was a Papago golf course. This, Mr. Fredrickson, the architect that was working with Staples Golf, at the very beginning showed me this clubhouse. And it amazed me because everything that it had in this clubhouse I felt was exactly what we needed at Trailhead. This is the indoor-outdoor flex space that they have at that facility. Those doors are roll-up doors, and they have grass outside, so we have that flex space to go in and outside. Next one, please. Again, same Papago golf course. This is the restaurant, bar, and grill. The bar actually opens up to the outside, and those doors roll up. Yes, it is in Arizona, but in the summertime here, we could do the same thing. The part that we're missing at Trailhead, where the families that come to hang out, all they have is the deck right now. And so this would be their vision anyways of what the bar and restaurant could be. This is the one thing that we have now is a full restaurant. Other golf courses have some form of snack bar. They don't have a full restaurant. The only one that I could think of in the area that has a full public restaurant attached to it is Kalispell. Used to be a country club. Now it's open to the public, and they actually have a public restaurant attached to it. I don't know if anybody's been there. It's very nice, but it's a standalone restaurant that can sustain its own. It's owned by the tribe. So, and as far as the snack bars at other golf courses, if you talk to any of the golf pros around, and they would, if they gave up their numbers to you, if they broke even at those snack bars, they would be super, super happy. So even the amount that we get right now for rent from the building, this 50-year-old building that we're in, that amount of money is more than any of the other golf courses are making right now. So if it could be even better, there's an opportunity there. We have guaranteed rent with no headaches running a restaurant. We just be able to get that rent check every month. And also it's the best view in town. You go to all sort of other restaurants or other places to hang out in the city of Liberty Lake, and you're usually looking at a parking lot or the freeway, or, as far as restaurants or places to hang out. Trailhead and Palenque are probably the best views in town. So if a restaurateur came in there, they would love to be there. They do have also the opportunity for kind of a triple threat income, what other restaurants don't. They have people that are just coming to the restaurant. They have people that are on the golf course. And then they have the option of maybe something for the meeting space and helping them out in food and beverage. So that would be a very desirable place to have a restaurant. Next one, please. So this is the golf course. This is Papago again. This is just showing, this was Andy Staples of Staples Golf. After they built the facility, he came back several months later and just went there on a Friday. And if you look at this video, I know we've showed this before, but not everybody's seen it. When the video goes, you can see there's live music, a lady playing guitar there, singing, the bar. And then as it pans through, you're going to see kids playing out on the grass. And this is exactly what I think Trailhead could be in the future. So keep that. A little staggered, but you can see all as it's going, the kids playing out on the grass. Of course, this is Arizona. It's a little bit different. But as it pans through, you can see that it's very family oriented, even though it is at a golf course. Papago does not sit right in the city either. The people have actually gone there to hang out at this place on a Friday night and bring their kids with them. So that's exactly what I was envisioning for Trailhead. Next one. This is just Papago again. This is their golf shop on the corner here, which is close to the first tee. As far as the golf shop for us would just be a little bit better location where we can see the first tee a little bit better. You've all been there to look at the golf shop. We're bursting at the seams. Sales before I got there in 2011, the most merchandise was $24,000. We're going to hit 70, or last year we hit 75,000. So merchandise has tripled in that 10 years. And honestly, it's just being held back by how big the facility is. So next one, please. Bless you. Driving range. Driving range has been a huge thing for us at the golf course in the last 10 years. Revenue wise, we're definitely one of the best ranges in Spokane and definitely in Liberty Lake. We've made some good changes to the driving range that brought a lot of people in. Revenue has been incredible for the driving range. The biggest thing is, honestly, at this point, we've outgrown that driving range. It is constantly full and people waiting to get onto it. We now have 3 high schools, which have 6 golf teams that are trying to use it in the springtime at the same time that the public is trying to use it. And those kids that are playing high school golf are our future of golf. We want them to be able to use our facility. In talking to the trajectory study person that does for driving ranges, pretty simple. If you do a regular driving range and then you make it a double decker, the netting gets 14 feet taller. That's it. That's all it changes. It doesn't change anything else, the length or anything like that. Right now we have a space for 14 spots on the driving range and then maybe 8 on the grass. So we have 22 people that can hit at a time. I was a little bummed because I had the trajectory study guy working on something to show us today and just didn't get it done. But if it was in a better shape, meaning right now our driving range is kind of in an odd shape because the netting's been moved a few times and we're at odd angles. When I talked to him, if the the driving range was in a rectangle and the teeing ground was in a horseshoe, we could almost get 50% more just on the ground. And then of course, if you make it a double decker, now we've made a lot more spots. So he was talking about 50 spots instead of 22 by the time we're done, which I could tell you right now, we would fill up on a regular basis. We have people that leave the golf course or just because they've been waiting too long and they'll go somewhere else. So it's definitely something that range revenue has gone up pretty quickly. The driving range that I would envision, though, would bring more community people in also. The latest technology right now, if you've ever been to Top Golf, last time I was at Top Golf, there was some guys next to me that I could tell I've never played golf before. And they were there because it was like going to a bowling alley for them. It was just another recreation to go out and have fun. And they were there for 3 hours while we were there hitting too. So I can see kids, you can play games on it. And the good part about the latest technology is a lot of those things can be leased. It's not something that you have to put the money up front. And what I would envision is somebody can go to the golf or to the driving range. They could pay their $10 and hit their large bucket of balls, or they could go there, pay the $10, get their large bucket of balls and swipe their card and now use the technology if they wanted to. It's not you have to, it's just an option. And then, like I said, for family, and then still covered and heated. That's our biggest thing in the wintertime. Or even in the summertime when it's raining. We are the only driving range in town that is covered. So if it's raining and you want to hit golf balls, the only place you can go in town is Trailhead. And in the wintertime, I should have taken some pictures the last couple of winters because it's a blizzard outside and there's 10 people hitting range balls when it's 25 degrees out. So if it was a little covered a little bit better, heaters were a little bit better, I think we could even do a little bit better than that. So there's opportunity there. Next slide, please. So these estimated costs are right from Staples Golf from their study and figuring everything out. That's why the range between option 1 and option 2 aren't exact what these numbers are. Reason being, those numbers are almost 2 years old now, but they kind of break down the essentials of the above the hill. Pretty much everything that I was talking about above the hill is on that list. The only difference is either the single or double decker range, which isn't a large expense when you're thinking something that's going to hopefully be around for 50 years. Option 2, the campus option. This is one thing that I've looked at, and on that campus option, one of their biggest things is that the driving range, when it goes down below, would only have to have netting on one side of the driving range. I have gone over this for the last couple of years. I've done measurements. I've figured out as far as golf balls going where they're not supposed to. And I myself, and I am not the expert in this, the trajectory study guy would be able to help me out a little bit more, but right now I'm not convinced that netting wouldn't have to be on the left-hand side. And so when you add that other expense of $800,000 or $900,000, that's when that number of the campus option jumps up quite a bit. And so that's why I had it between $9 and $11 million. There's definitely some other things miscellaneous. Some of the amenities that they had, they didn't have exact numbers for. So again, these are just ideas. The biggest thing that to come off of the two options is, in my personal opinion, and being there for 10 years, is we have a great model that's working, and the revenue keeps going up every single year. We just have a building that's past its lifespan and a driving range that is now deteriorating and is continuing to be busier and busier every year. Just the 3 driving ranges in Liberty Lake, one we hit into the water, the other one we hit into the sun, and then the third one is Trailhead. So we, just because of what land we have and where it is why we have an upper hand on those driving ranges. So anything else I wanted to say before, but yeah, basically in closing, my opinion would be, just for the impact of the golf course, the overall cost, my opinion would be to go with option 1 and just fix what we have. It was a golf course when it was built. It's a golf course now. And I believe that if we can just enhance what we have, it can continue to be great for the next 50 years. That's a question.
One quick question. Chris, have you taken into consideration what the lost revenue would be if going with option 2? Because that actually would make the cost go up above the estimates.
Okay. You're gonna get your workout. Mayor, we have not. So I haven't got that far. And the reason for it is, once it got to closer to construction and the people that were actually constructing it, they could tell us. We talked a little bit about it with Staples Golf, is, how long would the range be closed down if we were redoing the range? They said, depending on when we started the construction, it might be for an entire season. But if we could start it in the fall and finish it in the spring, then we might be able to use the driving range the next season. Golf course itself, there's quite an extensive amount of stuff that would have to be moved. So I would anticipate, if you went down onto the golf course and put the driving range down there, just talking to Staples, that it would be probably an entire season. Oh. Any other questions?
Yeah, and maybe just simplify this.
Sure. I'll just walk around.
Well, okay, you can hear me, right?
No, but
I can, but they
I
can't.
understand. You just restate.
Sure. Yeah. I'll try that.
But my other question is, for the driving ranges right now, is there enough space there to accommodate what you just identified earlier on the rectangular decks? Is there enough room?
So the question is that on option 1, is there enough room to fit everything that we're talking about, or what I was talking about in option 1? Can you bring that slide up? So the driving range, yeah. Sorry, go back a couple slides here. Get back to where it says option 1. It'll make a little bit more sense. I should have stayed on that a little bit longer because it. That one. So when I talked to Staples Golf and the trajectory study person this last couple of weeks, what I was asking them was, if we make the drive range in the shape that we need to make it to be the most efficient, what land do we have left for parking and possibly short game area and the things we need to stick in there? And over the phone, me talking to Andy, that's why this drawing is the way it is. So if you see kind of to the north towards the street, all of the driving range itself gets narrower. So we have less poles, less netting than we do now, because it's more efficient. So that's why also up there, again, crude drawing, but at the teeing area, it's more of a horseshoe. It would actually be a little bit more rounded than that is. So everybody that's on the driving range is basically hitting towards the center of the driving range, not just straight out or at an angle of the driving range. So all of that land above to the north and then behind the driving range net right now, which is kind of our grass tee area, all of that would be available for something else. The other is, I don't quite have the line correct on the south side here. Kind of by the end of the driving range, the hill comes down a little bit further. But in talking to Staples again, yeah, so if it would actually extend a little further down to the bottom of the hill. That entire hillside, the land, when they would have to move all the land for everything that they're doing on top, that would all be redone. The putting course, if that was something they had, or a short game area, all of that could be on that hillside, which is out of the way of play. And so there's some areas that open up. And the biggest thing that I didn't touch on very long was parking is one of our biggest issues. Just having a driving range, a golf course, and a restaurant, we don't have enough parking. Right now, our parking lot has, I believe, 81 stalls. When they redid this, and I talked to them about it, and kind of going off of one of their other renderings, it had parking that extended all the way over and actually met up with City Hall's parking lot, and it ended up being 231 spaces. So from 81 to 231, and that's also not doing anything with the two slopes that are on the corner. So that's been talked about. Architects have talked about having a wall. Go ahead.
Chris, what I was gonna say is the answer to Phil's question is yes.
Yes, the short answer. Sorry, Phil.
I just didn't want to lose that.
No. I told Katie she's got to cut me off sometime. So
Chris, could you go through one more time? How do we go from 83 to 200 some odd? Explain that.
Laser pointer right
Now,
No,
explain
but-
that again.
I don't.
I was 10 feet tall. So if you look at Country Vista.
Here, I can get up there.
Okay.
So make sure you use the mic so the people online.
Okay. So there is in that packet, and I'll try and get over here. There's one of their renderings that they were doing, because we had 5 different options at one point. One of their options, the parking lot actually it extends from there, goes along the road, and actually extends all the way over to here. So I'm using, just for myself, Jackson Park Golf Course in Seattle. I'm using that as an example. Their driving range on one side is all parking along it. It's got 2 rows of parking that go right up against the fence. On the other side of that parking lot is a 4-lane busy road. On the back of their range is a playground. And on the left-hand side are soccer fields. So literally they have to keep all their golf balls inside of that range and make sure nothing gets outside of it. But when I saw that, what I was thinking is, well, we have that little strip along the road that if we could grab that, and that's what I talked to Staples Golf about, that you could have parking. And when I went to Jackson Park driving range, I actually parked at this very end stall right here. And it was not a big deal for me to walk down and go to the golf shop and get a bucket of balls and hit them and walk back to my car. So that's when I was talking to them in the last couple of weeks is, do we have enough room there to put more parking in? And in the rendering that I'm talking about, it doesn't even have any parking down here at all. It's only from there over. So, and again, this is a crude drawing, so this rectangle isn't exactly perfect of where it's supposed to be. I just, like I said, in talking to them, I wanted to make sure that we weren't going to lose something. We weren't going to lose a putting green. We weren't going to lose something that we already had. Can we get all of it on top of the hill and not feel like we're crammed and have it efficient? And for both of them, it was a 100% yes. There was plenty of room for that. But if we started to add, that was the big thing, is just adding one more amenity, all of a sudden we don't have enough room. So that's what they struggled with when they first did it, is as soon as they added one thing, there just wasn't enough square footage. They either lost too much parking or something had to give and there just wasn't any more room. I mean, at one point they were trying to incorporate part of City Hall and having some stuff out in front of City Hall because they just ran out of room. And they did ask about the Arboretum, which as far as I'm concerned was, what I've heard is it was donated. So that was off limits. So we couldn't use any of that. So that landlocked them a little bit on that side too.
Chris, just to clarify, you're talking in option 1 of replacing the existing building, correct? In the same location, putting a new building up?
Correct. Yeah. Question was if I was talking about replacing the building we have now. The answer is yes. We did some. Chris. Go.
I was going to say, were you thinking the current main level and the walkout, or this is obviously something council will discuss later.
Sure.
Or a second level, so you have the main level, the second level with some meeting space and then the walkout. What's the number in the estimate?
That's all one level. So that building would be all one level. There's some things that get into with 2 levels, just talking to the architect, I'm sure everybody probably knows, but now we're into elevators, things like that. One of our biggest things right now, that's a kind of a time waster for us, is our golf carts are underneath. Every morning, well, not me, very, very often now, but we walk back and forth 14 carts. We have to drive each cart up every morning and put them all back down every night. New golf courses and we have either storage that's on the same level or a way to get golf carts out and cleaned and put back more efficiently. So all of the ones that they have done, other than ones that have big restaurants, large meeting rooms, country clubs, things like that, where there's a lot more space, all of the ones they're doing now are on one level.
Thank you. So back to your driving range.
Yes,
So where the arches at the top is where you keep from.
correct.
So you have capability to do a 2-tier, 3-tier, 5-tier?
Yes. Yeah. So you're just stacking on top of each other. So the question is, on the arc there on the driving range, is can we do more than 1, more than 2, more than 3? Yeah, absolutely. I actually went to the driving range in San Jose, the double decker down there, just to look at. I've seen a lot of double decker, and if you go to Top Golf, you're talking triple, quadruple deckers there also. But yes, you can keep going up. Like I said, all it is each time you go up, the fence needs to go 14 feet higher. That was from the trajectory study person. So he said, if you guys want to start at 1 and go from there, we can keep going up, and we just have to add. And because those poles are metal and they start big at the bottom and go small to the top, they just keep welding more on top.
You have to carry the clubs.
Anything else?
Yeah, Chris, and everybody who's listening, can you give us what the height of our poles are now? How far they would have, how much more they would have to go for the existing level we have? And also, if there's another level added, you mentioned 14 feet, because I do know that what's come up in the past, there is a maximum you can go in height of poles.
So question or a statement was, what are we at right now as far as the pole height on the driving range? We actually didn't know what the poles were on the left-hand side until we just had the netting repaired. So those are 70 feet tall on that left-hand side. The back and the right-hand side are 30 feet tall. So the biggest issue with the golf course or the driving range is that the picture that I saw from 1982 had nothing around it, right? So that driving range was built, there was nothing around it, didn't have to protect from anything. Now it's sitting right in the middle of the city. Next to a busy road, and now to keep golf balls in, Dave Tanner Consulting does almost all of the trajectory studies for all golf courses around the United States and actually around the world. He is the expert. You go to him, you say, this is where we're gonna have a driving range. This is the topography. He looks at wind. He looks at what size tee we're using on the driving range. It's very extensive. He came back, and the tallest one that we would have was 138 feet, right? 138 feet. And if you've gone to any cities and looked around and you see one of those driving ranges, you look at it for a second, the netting actually disappears. The poles are black. Yes, it's definitely, if tomorrow you had 138 foot tall poles right on the driving range where there's a 30-foot pole, it's going to be an impact. But really over time, if you look at those, they do, sightly wise, they do kind of disappear with the black netting. But to keep all the range balls in the range and to make sure it's safe and no one can be hit outside of those, that's how tall they need to be. Now, that's not every single pole that high. It obviously goes short to high. And actually, when you look at his studies, they're kind of strange because the netting looks all different. That's just because he's figuring out, because some of those ranges aren't perfect rectangles, or the teeing ground isn't a perfect round. So ours would actually be, they will all be the same height on both sides and then in the back if it was a rectangle. Right?
Yeah, great, thanks for answering that. I think it's important that I don't want to get the impression we're going to get down to inertia and type of stuff, but you and I had conversation in the past that I think it's important you speak of how distant our poles are now, because as you're right, the netting disappears.
Mhm.
Our son's house is directly at the end of the netting. And when we sit out on that deck, you don't see the net after a period of time. You just see the poles. Our poles are now, I believe, are about 40 feet apart. 30,
Yes,
40.
poles are about 40 feet apart, yeah.
Can you address the new poles so everybody's aware of that?
So there's and this is something that I just found out when we were replacing the netting that came down in the windstorm. There's a company, and I don't know if they're the only company, I'm trying to find a little bit more about it right now. There's a company in Canada that's making netting that the poles can be 80 feet apart. So now you're talking about the biggest expense for the pole and the netting is the poles. And talking to those guys, they pretty much almost guarantee the poles for 100 years because it's just a steel pole that's there, holding it. So once you put the poles in, you're done. And then depending on, netting is getting better and better over time. The netting that we have, as far as we can tell, it's almost 30 years old. And it's only they're only going to give you a guarantee of 10 or 12 years. But it was 30 years old before it finally ripped and fell down in one spot. So, every 25 years or so, that one expense you're going to have to do. But it's the smallest expense of the driving range, is the netting. It's the poles that are the most. So yes, I'm very intrigued about the poles because when I was talking to Judge Netting, which is the company that originally put up the netting at Trailhead, they've also fixed the netting at Trailhead numerous times and then also fixed it when it broke this time. I was trying to have a conversation with them about that before I got here, so I'd have an answer, but I'll have an answer for that pretty quickly. Because if we can cut in this configuration right here, we're already going to get rid of some poles because it's in the right configuration. And then secondly, if you can almost get rid of every other one now, that $1.7 million for the poles and netting might come down significantly. But I don't have that information yet.
Thank you.
Any other questions for Chris? If not, we can go into discussion.
Leave it, you'll be available for questions throughout this.
I'm not leaving. I'm not leaving until we're done.
It's fine, it's fine. Now we're going there, finish it, Chair?
So we'll note for the record, we had excused Councilman Dunn now. So yeah, so as we get into discussion, please remember to pass the microphone. And I've got the report here, so I'd like to describe.
I can be the runner.
Chris?
Mike,
Oh,
Mike,
see, I already ruined it.
Question for Chris.
Option one and option two, the relationship between the building and the driving range. Driving range is a major revenue producer. Option one seems that the driving range is still separate from the building. So I've got it. Unless we have the technology, the driving range to swipe a credit card, get balls right there. So they'll walk around the building. So get some balls there and walk all the way back to the driving range. Option two seemed like the driving range trying to build around the back side of the building. So I'm walking through straight into the driving range. Right. Am I understanding that correct? Do you mind just addressing the relationship between the clubhouse and the driving range?
So in option one, yes, the building and the driving range are almost separated the same way they are right now. Technology wise, I even looked at it. Our ball dispenser right now can do credit cards, and we're not just as an option. It can do cash or credit card, not even attached to us. The driving range being set into the hillside below, same amount of distance from us. One of my biggest issues, and I'm glad you brought it up, one of my biggest issues with the driving range being down below, yes, the teeing ground would kind of disappear because of the hill. I know why they went that direction, trying to kind of make the driving range disappear a little bit. But I already started thinking of issues of where our ball machine was going to be and where the clubhouse was going to be was now on the bottom and top of a hill. And I'm already having issues with just going up and down stairs. So logistics for me already, I was thinking this might be a little bit of a nightmare that way to have it that far away. The way it is right now, next to the clubhouse, all of that credit card, cash, however we're having people pay can be there. And it's just a site to site to be able to, or point to point.
I feel like it's working better.
All the way around. I've looked at this extensively between, their campus idea and I mean, it's beautiful and I like it, but for me, the essentials that we have, like I said, are working and they're actually working well in the right place. Yes, there's little tweaks that I would make to make it easier on us on a day-to-day, like I said, talking about power carts and things like that. I did have a slide at the end about power carts just because somebody had asked about power carts, and that's also a very large revenue stream is power carts. So, but it's one of our biggest tasks also. So you're asking how close driving ranges are to the clubhouse. I think of things like how quick can I get golf carts and how quick can I get golf balls to the range and all those things that take time, which is labor and cost. So.
I don't think I need a mic.
Sure.
I would say looking at, what we have here is what is the project, of course, you're covering that now. For myself, I'm really excited about option one, because I have to go back 2016, which I've got these folders here that started back in 2016 when we started looking at this seriously. And the first thing we identified was what do we really have to do, not need to do or want to do, what we have to do. And what the have was the building. We had to do something with the building. There wasn't an option there. The other thing was the driving range. We have to put something there. So based on the have to, everything, even Staples Golf is what we've looked at. To me, always keeps bringing me back to that. And I think option one covers that, covers it well. I think some of the other things that they propose for our consideration are warm and fuzzy. I think they're one thing when they have their meeting, they're all different individuals trying to get input. But one thing they kept bringing up was that if we were to do the whole option, we would be the premier golf course in the United States. It would be an example of what we should be doing. I think that's great if somebody wants to be an entrepreneur and do that. I'm not in favor of using our citizens' money to be a cornerstone for other golf courses. So therefore, I really like option one. I think it's, if we can come to a consensus, what everybody is in favor of, one or two, then I think it's easy to move on to a bunch of them.
Why don't we go ahead and chat, maybe the class, like, and get everybody's initial input on the options, and we can try to go from there.
I'll make one other choice here, if you don't mind. Thanks.
Well, I like the idea that we're just going to replace what we already have. It's been functioning for a long time. It's well used, it's well worn. I think that we want to stick with option one at this point.
Yeah, I also agree. I like option one. First, I really value your input on this too, and I agree with what Mike's saying. When we started this journey, so we want to stay for golf courses for 7 months. I'm stable with that. I also appreciate what you're saying, Chris, with option one. Very efficient on the golf course to take our record, brought our revenue up over the years. With option one, proving that there will be additional efficiencies to the driving range, or additional revenue there. Through the new building, there will be additional efficiencies by potential indoor winter activities through golf, like simulators and things like that. So it seems to me that option one allows a lot of intrinsic entertainment value to our citizens, even though it is still a golf-centric location.
Is that gonna work for you, or is there too much feedback?
Entertainment or rec type facility for our citizens. So it's an expensive project. This is the least expensive of the option. It seems like it's still, we just get great value out of what we're doing. So option one.
Trying to make some notes. I too am in favor of option one. I like your statement about the hill. One of the things that I thought about for quite some time as the overall project is the monies that have already been spent on the irrigation system for the golf course itself. It's great working condition, I'm assuming, right?
Yes.
So I would prefer not to fiddle with that. So that's why I like the above the hill concept. Just a few things. I'm looking at our goals here. What is the project? And I'm trying to formulate my thoughts on to help answer that later on. But for me, there's a couple things above the hill. It's the building that incorporates certain features to support the golf course operations, a food and beverage of some sort. If we can find a way to incorporate a meeting place, I think that would be useful for our citizens. I know you said one level building, and I don't want to get into the details, but the lay of the land kind of calls for a 2-level building almost, especially if you want to have a nice deck or a patio or something of that nature. The driving range seems to be a good revenue source, so why not focus on improving that as you described? Maybe a couple of different layers of places to tee off with food and beverage service. I would go for sure, and obviously better parking. So I think we're heading in the right direction above the hill. Thank you.
Chris, can you tell me what the difference was between the two costs for option one? I see 7.5 to 9 million for option one, but what was the cost for option two?
Between 9 and 11.
Okay. So I'm going to dissent and say that I am more in favor of an option two, and I think the reason why for me is because based on the report that we got, talked about only 8.9% of the population of our city actually uses it the way it is as a golf facility. And I think that it's important to, if we're going to spend this amount of money for it to be something that can engage some of the other community, that it's a big expense. So if there are some ways to add something, maybe not the, option 5 on here, but if there's something else that can be added to it to have some part of a feel of family, to get me on the golf course, right? Like I don't golf, I have never been there. But if we're going to spend this amount of money, I would like to do that. And I think at 44, probably not because so from that perspective, but also when we were originally talking about the different options, the 1 through 5 that they presented, it went from like, I think it was 1.5 million to like 9 million. And if we're looking at doing something that's not terribly far, there's not a huge scope of difference. I mean, $2 million is $2 million, right? And that is a lot of money. But if there's a way to add another piece to it that more of the community can use, I'd be in favor of that. When they gave the presentation and talked about snag golf, that was one of the things that was designed to help bring the younger crowd into it to become lifelong golfers. So that was one of the things that stood out to me in the presentation last year. I think the idea of being able to do the driving range where it is, it does make sense. It does limit the ability to do some of those other things. But I want to make sure that when we're talking about this, we're talking about more of our community being a part of it. If we're going to invest this amount of money versus just 8.9% of our population.
Thank you. Chris, I appreciate all your work on this. I'm not a golfer, although I have golfed with my ex-husband, as long as he didn't make me keep score. I just whacked it to a win in the hole. I do enjoy the driving range aspect, so I'm intrigued by the 2-tier. I like to hit the ball, I just don't like to play the actual game. Honestly, I think I'm in favor of option 1, simply because, mostly because you are. You're the expert here. I am not, clearly. You know what the business model has worked for our city. You know that you said that we could keep the facility going in some fashion while construction is going on in the building. I do wonder if a 1-level building is going to work, and of course I'm not an architect either, so I'll leave that up to you and the people who are experts at that. But I really appreciate all the work you put into this. I agree the building is not feasible at this point, and we really need something new there. I can see where, as Councilmember Kurt said, it'd be nice to have other things, but it's still basically a golf course. And I think we could draw more people in. Like I said, I might even be tempted to go just to try it out because we used to play on a little 9-hole course in Indiana. So thank you. I'm in favor of option 1.
Thanks to, and apologies for the delay. I work thing. To synopsis or summarize, option 1 is to continue to advertise driving range presented in the presentation and really try to focus the peers on physical facilities, buildings which support the operations of the developers. I tend to agree with Councilmember Kurt's observation that we're taking a moment to make a considerable investment in the community. And I'm going to say it compares or even exceeds the original acquisition of the golf course. What I perceive is I would like to somehow extend the appeal and the utility of a public facility beyond what might be its current constituents. I feel like you're definitely serving a really awesome constituency with respect to golf and golf operations. But I personally found very appealing in some of the conceptual proposals. Physical facilities, which would broaden the appeal of the facility. My personal perspective is the golf course as an asset to our community, number 1 is open space, and then second, recreation space. But then the recreational space I always kind of struggled with a little bit because unless I paid green fees and carrying a bag, that's not what that space is for. So I guess I'd reflect on respect and a recognition of option 1, but just wondered if there was some way to include some aspect of an amendment which would broaden the appeal of the facility beyond its current constituency.
So pretty much what I'm hearing.
It's going to be described as best as I can here today. So what I'm hearing, based on those, it's really a general consensus for 1, but maybe a 1+, but with maybe the, if possible, additional family type amenity. And not maybe completely going to 2, but maybe like a 1+ or a 1A and a 1B. Is that pretty accurate summary from everybody? Right.
The summary was 1.
Well,
5 of us.
Right, but I'm summarizing the discussion. It's an overall 1, but does there need to be discussion about the possibility of a 1+? I'm just going to keep notes. So I think we went around the room once to maybe go back around to see if anybody would like to add to that, and if anybody else is in favor of the option 1+, now would be the time to say that. And if not, that's fine too, but
So I can start off. I need a little more time to think about that. Myself, I would love to see a golf course, obviously. I love playing putt-putt with my grandkids and can't do that here. So I really like option 1 overall. I agree with Chris that I think we need to be careful about how we use the land so we don't make major changes. You see, we've already upgraded the sprinkler system. So if there's a way to add an amenity, I guess I'd be okay with that, as long as it didn't cost an arm and a leg. 3 feet, but otherwise I'm okay with just option 1.
So in option 1, one of the things I didn't talk about was, I talked about it a little bit, but this area on the side, on the hill, I did talk to him about other community, amenities that maybe were still somewhat golf related, and putt-putt's one of them, right? So yes, putt-putt golf is golf, but when you talk to most people, or like I do, that are learning to play golf, I'll say, have you gone to the driving range before? No. Have you ever played putt-putt golf? Well, yeah, I've done that. So that's one of those activities it's golf, but it's not golf, I guess. So the putting course was actually one of them that I didn't really talk about, was in option one. So that's something that you could walk up to. We talked to, Mike and I talked about it yesterday a little bit. And that was, it could be something that there was no fee for. Even at those, this is a natural putting course. So this isn't clowns and windmills, but this is actual grass that people could use as practice, but then people could bring their kids to and have fun and, rent some putters and some golf balls and go use it. Or if they bring their own, then there would be no fee for it. A lot of those places, putting courses are just a couple dollars to play. So it's something that's not very expensive, but it can get people that aren't golfers to do something. And then the driving range, even though it maybe seem intimidating a little bit, but the tech that I was talking about, there's technology where you're hitting golf balls and it's smashing monsters on the screen. So there are things that it is golf. It's to try and get kids into golf or get people into golf, but they don't really feel like they're playing golf, I guess. And then the third one is, we didn't talk too much about simulators and winter revenue, which is one of my big things, that we don't really have very much winter revenue. Simulators have boomed in the last few years. There are places even here in Spokane that are doing very well, and I feel like we're missing the boat on that a little bit. When I went to a PGA show in Orlando, not yet last year, but the year before, and looked at the simulators, and now these simulators are not just golf simulators. So you can have a golf simulator, but you can practice soccer. So they have a goalie that you're kicking a soccer ball to. They have batting practice that you can bat to, even had hockey. So if that's something that we had simulators at the golf course in the wintertime, you don't necessarily have to come and use it as a golf simulator. You could, if your kids were soccer, there's a virtual goalie that you're kicking against. So there are some things that you could use that are golf but aren't golf and still be an option one. Not building an entire snag golf course is nice, but it's expensive. And if we had the land, I would definitely, that would be one of the things I would have been pushing for, was the snag golf. But we also have an entire golf course that we can do the same thing on, that we already have. So that's getting back to my opinion a little bit.
Yeah, thank you, Chris, and also thanks for everybody's comments. Since day one that I've been involved with this, I've been an advocate of we really need to have a putt-putt on it. For many, many years, Ben and I were fortunate to travel south and spend the winter down there. And one thing that's unique in all these resorts that we spend a lot of time in our property is every one of them had a putt-putt. What's incredible is that when the grandkids would show up and things of that sort there, what was busy all the time? The putt-putt. It was amazing. 3 weekends ago, Betty and I took the motorhome and spent a weekend down at Sun Lakes Resort. And amazing enough, we had an 18-hole putt-putt there. And the resort wasn't even open yet. And yet, the 3 days we were there, I kept an eye on it. I went over and utilized it. I took pictures of it. And what was interesting is that from sun up to sundown, families were using it. Now, they have a golf course there also, which was not being utilized. But that putt-putt was being utilized all the time. So that's something I'm absolutely encouraged about, that we do that. That's an amenity that we don't have to charge for. It'll encourage individuals to go there. Now, with some of those people that should play golf, maybe they would. But once again, I'm not motivated to spend 92% of people's income for 8% of the golfers. But I am interested in having a putt-putt in a restaurant, things of that sort there, that the rest of the citizens can go in and utilize. That's very good. Keep in mind that option one has a lot to do with how much parking do we have. As it stands now, when you go through this report, one thing they point out several times, and Chris has pointed out, we don't have sufficient parking for what we have right now. We're losing revenue because of that. So the key thing is, I think we have to keep in mind of the 1 or 2 is that, do we have sufficient parking? Because I believe that will motivate us and help us determine what option we're going to have and how much we're going to spend. Thank you.
So I want to be really grateful for opinions, both for all your Mike's observation as I'll say the grandparents. And that resonates with me a lot. And I say that I'm not yet in that place. I will be. But I'm going to reflect on that in a different way. I'm in the teenager piece right now. And I got to tell you, I really, really appreciate appreciate an opportunity for teenagers and young adults in our community to spend time outdoors in the company of their peers and their family. And such a thing like a putting course, I think, would be a really great ability to keep the kids in our community and have them not in the basement playing video games all the time. So, thanks.
Awful video.
Yeah.
I think that we've already settled on the fact that we have limited space to work with here, right? Just by the top of our head. We're going to replace a building, probably to be larger than the footprint we already have. That takes more space. May take more parking away from what we already have. We only have so much space to add parking. Option one gives us a spread of 7.5 to 9. That estimate is a few years old. So we don't know exactly what we're dealing with here. Could come in at 5 million to do it. It could come in at 12. So we don't know. But what we do know is every time we add something, we're adding more money to that project. I like putt-putt. I've always thought we should have one here too. If it can be built within the confines of a pre-selected budget by this council and have that added, that's great. But not at the expense of more parking and not at the expense of our golf course itself. So if those two options can be figured out, and right now I believe that our business at hand is to say, do we want the project? Yes. Is it broken? Yes. What do we do? What's the concept? The concept's been laid out for us. Now, what is our budget and how are we paying for it? Because I think everything else has already been agreed on in principle. And we're not here to design the building. We're just here to say, yes, we support the project and give them the budget. So thank you.
We're done. So I just want to capitalize on Chris's comments that I think the way Chris is envisioning option one is going to increase citizen use of it to beyond the 80%. I do think it will. I've been to these, I've used these simulators. I've used the ones with soccer or baseball, but I'd say we've had social gatherings around these, and the non-golfers are equally amused as the golfers are on these, and adding some technology here. I just think that's an important piece that we don't lose sight of. Anyway, the way I look at this, I think there's going to be a lot more community use of the golf course, even with option one, not having to add some construction to it.
Thank you. Yeah, I would be in favor of option one plus. If you put it there. Yeah.
Well, it sounds like option one and two should be added to that upgrade.
But can you go back to the screen that you had option two? I was writing it down, campus concept, amphitheater, snake golf, ponds, all that stuff. There you go. So I guess in my mind, I'm looking at those options and I'm going, to me, it seems like we need to prioritize. It has already been identified what's most important for being the golf course, driving area. If we can incorporate these other options, as Andrew pointed out, I would be in favor of doing that. The putting course, I want clowns and windmills. I want the ball thrown back out. Come on, we got a little fun with that. I don't know that we need an amphitheater, and as you pointed out, the snake golf is maybe out of our budget. So bits and pieces, we just have to prioritize and do as much as we can with the funds that we have.
hang out way by. Chris, could you point out for us on the option 1 map where a cutting course would fit in?
Yes. So they had it in a couple different places, so that there's definitely. So in the different drawings that I saw of different configurations, they had a putting course here at one time, they had it here. They had it here below the clubhouse, kind of on the hillside there, and then they also had it in the very corner. So I think it was in the different scenarios of what was gonna go there, they were just plugging and playing, you know, it's almost like it could go in any of those spots. Once it got down to the actual design of what do you want it to look like, I think there's many spots that could go in, but it's kind of all the dead spaces where you can't really put parking and you can't, all the essential things that we need anyways, it's just, you can't fit those things there.
Thanks.
So I'm still in favor of something additional, so that option 1 plus makes sense to me. But I don't want, us to get boxed into, someone said putting range, so that's what we're gonna do. I think we should talk about some of the other options. We had 5 options. There were a lot of different parts and pieces to it. I know we were presented with option 1 and option 2 today, but there were a lot of different options that were presented as part of this too. And I think that, it is 12 acres. It is not a small space. There are options to do option 1 plus. And I think that's where you get into the design piece with the group, and we haven't done that yet. So I would be in favor today of figuring out, you know, if it's option 1 plus, option 2, but then what are the options? What are things that we want? Do we want a pond? I don't know. We're saying we probably don't want an amphitheater. That's okay. Do we want it to be a putt-putt golf course? It sounds like there's some momentum for that. But I would like to talk through all the different additional amenities that they offered as suggestions. And let's say yay or nay on those. And then I think we can also bring those into the design phase. And once they're in the design phase, they're going to tell us what fits and what doesn't. I hear that we don't want to lose parking. That makes sense. But I'm still kind of on the best bang for our buck for the community. When you're talking about snag golf, that's a moneymaker. One of the things that we've said is that, you know, it's a park and it doesn't generate a revenue. It's usually a loss, which is not bad because it's a park and it's an investment. But there were things in the binder that we got that were revenue generators for us. So I think from a long-term perspective, there are some things that we could do that would be compounding growth over the years. That would be a return on our investment. And I'm also cognizant that we don't want to, let's see. What I'm interpreting is that most people are thinking we don't want to build something that's super grand. Like that's just not us. That's how I feel. We want to build something that is a little bit better than what we have. We want to still have our people in our community playing on the course, not have it be this centerpiece that brings a lot of people in. We want to have it be something that is Liberty Lake resident friendly to do. But I guess my biggest point is just not getting, I feel like we're rushing really fast to going like, okay, we're going to do option 1 with putting green, but we haven't talked about the other stuff yet. So that's my feedback.
I'll speak next. I will just interject, you know, the point that, you know, Chris is the pro at the golf course and has, you know, identified the need, you know, we've got needs and we've got wants, the needs going forward, the parking, the building, you know, other things that he's identified. And it seems to me, based on your evaluation, Chris, that the other options that we were presented to point, you know, we had 5 or 6, because I think we had like 5 A, B, and C, or whatever it was, that those really may not even be feasible at this point. So I guess I would look to the rest of the council to you know, provide feedback on Amy's request to discuss the other options that we originally had back in 2020.
Once again, I appreciate everybody's comments on it, because I think that's how we manage to get things done. But I do want to point out, we've been looking at this in 2016, we've had many, many meetings. And the challenge with most of those many, many meetings, we never made a decision other than to have another meeting. And I think what's important is that I really appreciate Andy's comment, because it made me think, is that the additional things, what was recommended, are actually between 1 and 2. If you go to option 2, everything that they've mentioned, maybe adding, is there. Snag golf, things of that sort there. So I think what's important is that we don't leave here today without direction. The direction is really 1 or 2, a combination. I think that's what's important. If we don't do that, we're just gonna keep this down and go again. Try to figure out another meeting, to be able to figure out where we're gonna go. So I think what's important is that we establish what it says here, what is a project scope. If we don't establish that now, then I think we're wasting our time to talk about budget, how we're gonna pay for it, because that's all academic. If we don't establish now what we want, just put it off to another meeting. Let's finish this early. I do want to point out with the putt-putt is that there are 9-hole putt-putts and 18. 18 is an 18 different configuration. The majority of the places we've been where we've seen that, they have 9 holes. But the tee box is different, so you're able to use a different configuration. The one at Twin Lakes probably took up probably a third of an acre or more. It took up a lot of space. All the rest of them would take up very little space because they're usually right next to each other, and they're really successful. So, thank you.
I would just like to offer an idea perhaps, because the consensus on number 1 with added scope is completely doable. So the council today could decide, move forward with option 1, but bring back what we call additives with price tags that's associated with those additives, and the additives have to be feasible and don't compromise option 1. And so we could bring back those things, those ideas, those options with a price tag on them, and then the council could say, okay, we like these added options, and then we would know the price. So just an idea.
Can I make a comment on that? What I hear is another meeting. If we decide on option 1, but with the idea of looking at other things to be added on to that, are we just simply looking at it again? You know, my idea is that we establish a budget, and what can we get for that dollar amount?
Exactly.
Okay, and let's focus on that. Not, I'm going to be nervous if we establish a budget and say it's going to be X amount of dollars, and then all of a sudden it comes back, well, for another 2 million, we could have this or that. Now we're back to where we were.
Councilmember Seaver's hand is down.
I think I agree with both of you. I think I agree with both of you. I think you're saying kind of the same thing. I would hope that maybe when we're in the design development phase, that we see them as additives. So we set a budget today, and at that point we can say, oh, wow, putt turns out it costs an extra $1 million. Now we can think about if we want to strip it out. Was it actually in our whatever the budget was set? But that I'm hearing relative consensus that for the most part we like the option 1 layout, not the option 2 campus design layout. That start down the path of option 1, and now we start talking facility. What additives would we want to be pulled up through that? That's what I'm hearing.
So Katie, thanks for the clarification on that, just in the design piece. I think that's my thought. And just so everybody's clear, I want to make a decision today. I want to come up with a budget today. I don't want another meeting. But I meant in the moment, it felt like we were moving very fast towards, we're gonna do this, and we hadn't talked about some of these other things. So I appreciate your. So at this point, I don't know, would you guys like to have Kyle, welcome to your first retreat, go through the financing options, what, for what dollar amount would our payment be, where would it come from, kind of review that, and then get back to the discussion of, okay, what dollar amount do you guys want to look at?
Can you repeat that, please?
To have Kyle go through the financing options at the different levels, and then come back after we see the numbers, and then you guys can talk a little bit more about the budget and scope. But I think it's quite important to take a look at the payment options and the rates and everything and the timeframes for financing.
Thanks, everybody. So what I'm hearing basically between option one and option two, more focused on option one at this point. Probably the high end of option one, if we are indeed gonna, I don't know if it's a matter, is that we're looking at roughly probably a $9 to $10 million project at this point. If these are years old. And so what we'd be looking at is potentially like a $8 million debt service maximum. So we're going to have between our two REIT funds and the general fund $2 million to put towards this project in cash. So take that off the top, we're looking at $7 to $8 million debt service scenario. And if we look at the spreadsheet in section 8 that RJ put together, that first page. We have a couple of different options, and this was obviously based on past meetings. But what we'd be looking at is probably that $7 million range for debt service. And ideally, we'd want to move on this debt service sooner rather than later. I would see interest rates increasing kind of as we get into next year for sure, and as the recovery kind of completes itself. And so, so we would like to shore up this determination soon. My preference would be a 20-year debt service. So 15 years has the potential to hamstring us cash flow wise. It's not that we can't handle it. It's that we don't want to be in the position to have that become an issue. 30 years is also, for separate reasons, potentially a concern because we're likely going to see full build out of housing in Liberty Lake in its current form. Probably in, what would you say, Katie, like 10 years?
Probably 15 to 20.
Oh, 15 or 20. Okay.
I think it's
2040.
Okay. And so we're collecting a substantial amount of refunds on that new construction, and we can expect that for the next 20 years. And so we would be looking at, we would be having to find other areas for build out to continue the rate at which REIT receives those funds. But we have, we're still going to collect REIT no matter what, but just at the same rate is going to be the question. Question was, what's the effect on inflation on property taxes over the years? And this is a constant thing. Absolutely. So we're locking in our rate, and we're going to have a flat rate payment. And honestly, I think all of these scenarios, and it's just the comfort level of council on where that sweet spot is. Schedule versus what our eventual scope's going to be. So yeah. Any questions?
I've asked it before, and actually, debt service previously on one. I want to say it was previously.
The question was, what's the debt service previously on the land? I would have to look into that and get back to you.
It was 15,000, roughly 14 to 15,000 per month. So
We're paying about $167,000 a year.
For 17 years.
Debt service was 167,000 a year on the previous land. Is that
17 years. It was a 20-year, right? And did it in 17.
Wait a minute.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just wanted to throw out a figure, because we talked about this before. In my mind, we were putting out $168,000 a year, let's say 1/7 for the golf course. We're also putting out another 68,000 for town square, which is 68 or 86. So let's say 7. So that's 240, I'm gonna round it to 250. Right. I've always been in a comfort level of 300,000. I vote for that. Yeah. So for me, it's always been 300,000 figure. And I think that can fluctuate, but that's a very comfortable level that we've been at for.
I'd like, and apologies if you covered this before I walked in, but Chris, can we speak a little bit on the correlation between the added revenues that we expect versus the added expenditures on these improvements? So so the question would be, are expenditures for like maintenance and operations going to stay relatively the same, or are we going to see a spike?
So it depends on what amenities are added, kind of what I said before. So if we stay with the same thing, if we still have a driver and still have a restaurant, still have the golf course, and we're not adding anything where I might need more labor. Right now, I just need more labor because it's busy, and hopefully it continues to get more, or busier. But if we're adding more amenities where people have to check in and they have to rent things out, that's just going to be more labor. How much, I'm not sure, because we have to figure out how efficient ways to do it. But if we just had an upgraded clubhouse, upgraded range in the configuration where we are right now, above the hill, and say if there was a putting course, that there was no fee for it. But at that point, we're not doing anything there. Might be a little bit more maintenance, but not very much. But from my staff, there would be really any, unless it was just added more people, more revenue, then we're going to need more labor. But that's a positive, right? The revenue's going up, we just have more labor, so that's not a bad thing. But as far as just if it changed today, I wouldn't have it.
So obviously, yeah, that's an important consideration in this piece because, from what I'm gathering from this presentation, we expect our revenues to increase by that. So we got to factor that into how that plays a role in determining, a repayment schedule, because we're going to be using some of that revenue to repay the debt service. And so that's going to bring, that should bring our comfort level to a better place, knowing that we're going to have that added income.
I would really caution us to not get too tied up or excited about the additional revenue we're going to add. Why I say that is that I think what's important, it's easy for us to see how we're going to move forward with our existing golf course based on what we've had in the last 20 years. We averaged 23,000 rounds a year in the last 20 years. The projections that company put together showed within the first year to 2 years, some of these scenarios, that we would go from 23,000 rounds a year to 39,000 rounds a year. And then a few years after that was 46,000 rounds a year, which I believe is extremely inflated. So I really caution us, don't get too excited on the numbers they projected in there. Because also what it shows is taking right now $10.25 per round to $25 and $35. Those are totally unrealistic figures. So for any of us to start thinking, we're going to make so much more revenue, we can justify $400,000 a year, I think is foolish on our part. I think what's very smart for us to look at, if we're not spending $300,000, let's say it was going to cost us $450,000 a year for this. Let's focus on that. Because if we look at that's what it's going to be from this point on, and by chance revenue increases where it's in the black, and that's a plus. But the golf course has never been a revenue, never will be, in my opinion. Because even the revenue we're showing now compared to expenses, what's not taken into consideration is our debt service. 2.3 million dollars we paid for property, 1.3 we put in irrigation. None of that is in there. So keep that in mind, that we're still going to have those type of expenses in the future. And the golf course will not pay for that. So we go on the assumption that we're going to have to pay, let's say, $450 a year. Just $450 a year. Let's assume we're subsidizing now about $150,000, because that is the number that has been in the past. We can't get too excited about the COVID, because that's probably a one-shot deal. So what I think we realistically have to look at, everything up to COVID is what we can anticipate in the future. There's so many rounds, there's so many rounds. So I think we approach that way, we're not going to be too surprised. My other concern is this. We don't have a good track record coming in on budget. Now, on some things, yes, don't get me wrong. What required was 2.3 million. We're close to 4.5. You know? So when earlier you saw me cringe, is that, well, it was 7.5, 9 is probably 10 or 11. That makes me nervous because it's real easy for, well, we're already $7 million. No, $500,000 isn't that bad. Well, we're already in $500,000 there. Oh, another 300,000 is not that bad. It's always more. From day one, I remember when we first started talking about this, the revenue figure was $5 million, probably $1 billion. $2 million on the golf around 5 years. That's for 7. So I think we're still somewhere.
Chris, you mind just to reiterate what Mayor Pro Tem said about the maximum rounds you can do. I mean, obviously, you don't know every year how many days you're going to have, right? But how many maximum rounds you can do on a regular day?
So maximum rounds are a little relative because if we're open for 12 hours and we have 6 tee times an hour, and every single one of them was full of 4 people, which doesn't happen ever at any golf course. You know, there is a maximum, but there's there's the real maximum. Lately, as busy as we've been, like I said, so if right now our revenue is double, so that's the amount of people that are coming. I've never seen numbers like this since I've been there, and all of a sudden it's happening right now. I feel like we're pretty close to it this year. Father's Day was always our busiest day of the year. Every year I'd have 5 people working because it was just crazy, and we would do 220 players or so. On a 9-hole golf course, that's a lot to get around. Lately, on Wednesday, we did 206. It was a Wednesday. I mean, so right around that 220 a day in the middle of the summer. So at the end of this season, I'll know almost what the max of that golf course is, really, because I don't see us doing much more than we can actually do right now. If I was to guess, and I apologize because I didn't really think of that part coming in, but at 26, you can't get much more on there than 35 would be probably one of the busiest golf courses in town, especially being a 9-hole golf course. I will say that their numbers that they were doing, it's hard to say. I think the one thing that they missed in that is our green fees go up very slowly. In other parts of the country, they go up a lot faster. They'll jump $10 at a time. We jump 1 or 2 at a time. So yes, I think it's not that they were overinflated. I think they were just using the country in general as their thought process there. But some of the numbers were probably a little high. But again, I wouldn't expect us to double revenue in 8 years. So I was trying to get it done in 10. It happened even 2 years earlier. So we never know what's going to happen. And COVID, yes, I would say we did have a big spike last year. And honestly, everybody in the golf industry, even the PGA of America, sent out things talking to us about how 2021 was going to be prepared for it to go back down. And so, of course, that's what I'm thinking. These are professionals that are, that have been in this business a lot longer than me. So I'm waiting for this dip back down, and it did the opposite. It turned and went back up again. So no one knows the answer of what COVID is going to do to golf. I just know that golf has been a massive resurgence in golf. And I don't think it's going to dive back down as far as everybody thinks it's going to. It's going to probably come back down a little and then level off. And that's just where we're going to be in golf for a while. So there might be a little revenue there, but until last year, we barely got to, the even part. So yeah, I don't know how much you can count on for the revenue part going forward.
Like this one, it shows your last 8 years, 17 years. It's versus revenue.
So in that, just looking at it, and Kyle, you can tell me if I'm wrong here, but that was everything, including any piece of equipment that we bought, any mowers, that included any of the labor that was dual duty, somebody working somewhere else. I mean, this was the one to get it down to what it really cost. And Mike's right, is that things that are missing are debt service. Irrigation is not on here. So those big capital, the very, very large capital ones, those two are not on here. But this is, that's why you see strange spikes like in 2019. Why was it, why did Chris spend so much? That's not really what it was. It was a bunch of equipment that we had to do. Or when we bought golf carts in 2014, that's when we bought all 14 golf carts. That's why the big spike. So there's a reason for the big spikes. But normally you can kind of see if you take those large capital investments out, the expenses are kind of following the revenue, but the revenue all of a sudden right here caught up. And that's because in 2020, we didn't buy any, right? We had a little bit of a freeze. So we didn't buy any new equipment. We weren't buying anything new for the golf course. This was just technically how much does it cost to run it and how much, can we get revenue wise? And that's why all of a sudden it closed the gap really fast.
I could just interject some additional figures. And this is not to scare anybody. This is just to realize what we paid in the past, what's assumed we can handle this also in the future. We paid for what we paid for the golf course. We paid another $400,000 in interest over 17 years. We put $1.3 million in irrigation, and then there was multiple things we put in after that. Talking to RJ, so I think it comes out to be just almost $4 million we put in. Over the last 18 years, that's $222,000 more we put in every single year. Over and above the difference between what we collected, of an average of 500,000, we put out 600,000, so we put another 100 and some odd thousand to supplement the golf course. So those figures alone are 300 and some odd thousand. If you add to the debt service fund, debt service would be there. Those are really the numbers. So I really want to iterate. We're looking at 400,000, maybe another 100,000. Let's say if we're looking at 500,000. That's really, I think, a realistic number for us to look at. And what does that come out to? If that comes out to 7 million, 8, 9, 10, then I think it's realistic for me to look at what do we get for that amount of money. And so, well, what are we going to pay for it? This is the amount we're going to pay. If the golf course does a lot better and that's reduced, that's great. But let's look at the hard numbers. We're really going to cost.
I'm going to pose a question because I'd really like the council to give us some feedback on this, on your ideas. Would you rather be looking at total project costs, and when I say that, fully loaded, hard costs, soft costs, contingency and everything, a dollar amount, because if you have a number in mind, we'd like to know what that is, so we can look at scope, keep the scope below that budget. Or would you rather be looking at debt service? So I think what I heard you say was $250,000 a year was what we had paid for in the past for debt service. Anyway, not that that's the right number. Would you rather be looking at a debt service payment? And then the question is, how much can you get for that amount of debt service? And so that's just a general question. I wasn't sure which way the council wanted to approach it. Either give us a hard number and that's the project cap. and then we keep the scope and the soft costs and everything below that? Or do you want to look at an annual payment and give us, an annual payment and give us the feedback on how much capital you can generate from that? So just a open question. I'm looking at the builder and the finance guy and the bank.
Thank you. Great question. I think, first of all, we just all, like we all do at home, try to live within our means. So we've paid off pretty much every debt service we have currently. Is that actually?
Debt free.
We are debt free. So I guess as I think through this process, yeah, it's how much of a burden do we want to add back that we are now debt free. So I think maybe for me, the question is how much is that? What's that number? What's the yearly debt service? Also for me, I want to take into consideration any revenue that comes from the facility itself should be applied, or committed to apply to the debt service. However little it might be, or however much it might be. But the other thing I was going to say was of this equation, when we talk about debt service, how much are we going to inject in cash? 2 million? Is that cash on hand, or is that where does that come from?
Explain that just a little bit.
So that 2 million would be split between 3 funds. So we have REIT 1, REIT 2, and the general fund. So all of those are performing way higher than I think we anticipated. And so we're in a great position to start this process with just the reserves we have on hand.
Which are over and above what
Yeah, much higher than what we had budgeted for. So yeah.
Just so I'm clear and understand what you're saying, if we decide on a number for debt service and it correlates to 6 million, whatever the numbers come out to be, then you're saying that we're going to add another 2 million to our budget for the project. Is that if that's what the council wants, but that's a way of looking at it, is to narrow down a yearly debt service. So I guess the other part of the equation for me is, I know we're here to talk about Trailhead today, but this is one debt service. I'm sure we're going to be talking about other projects in the future. And I wouldn't want to see us get strung out to the maximum for this project, so it hamstrings us others.
I'll give my 2 cents. I'm just looking at some numbers I just ran real quick. I think Katie's the one that kind of talked about this 7 years ago roughly, and I agree with the concept. We have a long-term project. There's a value to financing it long-term because it spreads out the equity that our citizens pay. So on one hand, I look at that, this is a long-term project, which puts me on the idea of I would rather finance it for 30 years. The other thing I look at is, and I want to go back to my comment on, there's a fixed level payment that we're going to make for 30 years, 300,000. I'm just going off of the numbers on here, $327,000 today, 15 years from now, feels like $200,000 if we just use historic inflation rates, 3%. That's not as high. Inflation lower than that the last 10 years, but let's call that a 100-year number. 30 years from now, that feels like $90,000 a year. So our debt capacity or our cash flow feeling over time is going to get better, feel better just with historic numbers, 300 grand a day, 15 years from now, feels like 200. We've got additional capacity. That's why you finance things long-term at historically low interest rates. So I'm in favor of a longer debt service, even though the end result number is bigger. I think it's the city's favor and also just equitable to our citizens. I also just to kind of second what Mike said, I agree. I'm looking at this on a debt service number. I really appreciate your number, Kyle. Just nice, clear number. We can put 2 million in, great. Perfect. 2 million plus whatever we agree is a healthy number, debt service wise, annually. Great. How do we get to a number? I don't know the number off the top of my head, but 250 that we've been comfortable with in the past. I agree with Mike. I don't think that we should be, I agree with Mike and I agree with Chris. I agree that revenue probably will go up, but I think it's smarter to not bank on that. And say I shouldn't say definitely, but I think we'd be quite comfortable around the $300,000, $320,000 number a day at 7 million. I mean, I think we do that without much burden to the city. The number may be a little bit higher, but I don't know exactly what that number is. That I would be able to further from our finance director.
Thanks for the feedback. And I guess in my effort to paint a broader picture of what our build out looks like, I think I'm a little heavy handed on the 20 versus the 30. I'm 100% in favor of the 30 with the understanding that council knows, that our full build out might be completed just before that. But to your guys' point, it's a phenomenal point. It's an accurate point. Is you have a flat rate number and you're adjusting for inflation. You can basically count on these in correlation, costing the city costs. So.
To respond to Katie's initial observation, responsive to cash flow, would be the position I want to reflect on. I respect the debt service that the city can support in its long-term actions. I also want to echo then Hugh's observations about 30-year term with respect to the nature of the investment. The spend here, in my opinion, has that impact on the community in that greater longer term. So considering what is available or optionable in financing activity, I would be inclined towards the longer term in debt action.
Thank you. I appreciate everybody's comments being fairly new to council. I appreciate all your input. I also agree looking at debt service. Myself, when I moved here, I took out a 30-year fixed rate mortgage, not a 20 or a 15. Who knows if I'll even live another 30 years, right? So I would be in favor of that also, just because we can get more initial investment. I also want to emphasize one of the things Kyle said. I think we do need to get on this while interest rates are low. I see heads nodding. I think right now, this is a great time. If you can find a house that's affordable, because mortgage rates are very low, probably my houses aren't affordable, but the bond interest is very low right now too. And if we could make a decision on what we're comfortable with as far as what we can borrow and feel comfortable paying back and get the best bang for our buck for our citizens, and get the best facility we can for our citizens, I think we should move ahead on that.
I appreciate everybody's crunching the numbers and what that means. It's very helpful for me. So I'm in favor of the 30-year. If we're talking about a dollar figure, I know we talked about between $9 and $10 million, with the $2 million taken off the top, which would be $7 to $8 million. I think from that perspective, I would like to plan for the fact that things are expensive, and a total of a $10 million cap for me, from my perspective, to throw that out there for discussion.
I always tend to be a numbers guy on it, but, you know, as an individual, I love debt-free. I love the idea that the city is debt-free. I love the idea that I try to be debt-free myself. But there's intrinsic value, is a word that I use a lot of. And there's intrinsic value that the city has for the citizens. And if we go 30 years, which I do support 30 years, there's a difference of $1 million, like $1,100,000. If I do my calculations correct, over a period of 30 years, that's another $33,330 we're paying interest. So some may look at that, even myself, and go, you know, I want to spend another 30 grand if I can do it in 20. Well, that's where that, to me, the intrinsic value comes in. Yeah. Can we handle that, in my opinion? Yeah, we can. Yeah. Stretch out over 30 years. The city is going to grow at build out. Certain revenues will cease, but other taxes and stuff will be out. So as much as I like the debt free, as much as I like the 20-year, I would support the 30.
My thoughts are a little in line with Mike's there, but my numbers are a little different.
Okay. Compromise.
Well, I'm looking at the $7 million on our chart here, and it's a 9.6 for 30-year overall service, and it's a 8.366 on a 20-year, which is about a $1.3 million difference. So over the course of 10 years, that's 130 grand a year. And we defer to you on, does that make good sense? Because, yeah, we're getting it paid off in a short amount of time. Can we, I guess maybe what I'm wondering is the 130 a year more and get it over with in 20 years detrimental to our budget? What's the trade-off? I mean, to me, it's money going to somebody for interest versus getting our principal paid off.
I'm gonna ask, is there a prepayment penalty on bonds?
That will be worked out once we finalize that agreement. Sometimes there is, and then just for everybody to be aware, bonds, there are drawdown requirements as well. So it doesn't work quite the same as a loan. So if you come in under budget, we'll want to make sure that this particular financing tool, we would want to actually take advantage of the ability to give some of that back in the budget. So so we go with a bond financing company that RJ was telling me about. I think it's Northwest Municipal Advisors, and I'm going to be reaching out to them as we go along through this process, and I will get that information back to you because that would be very valuable pieces of information as we secure this financing and where exactly we can take advantage of some policies in one tool versus others. So. Oh, sorry. Yeah, and sorry to answer Councilmember Boyer's question. So yes, that you see a difference of roughly 1.3 million, and it's a number somewhere between probably 800,000 and 1.3 million. When you're figuring in inflation and what that flat payment is, and I don't know what that number is, but I wouldn't consider it 1.3 million. I would consider it something else.
I'm gonna try. Yeah, I'm gonna try it. So $1.3 million, 30 years from now, we back it out at 3%. We need $420,000 today, increasing it 3%, equal 1.3 million 30 years from now. So 1.3 million 30 years from now equals 420,000 today. So if we take 420,000 and spread it over the 30 years, then 420 divided by 30, and you had, let's just call it 14 grand a year. So kind of 14 grand a year to keep that low interest payment over longer, I think it is worth it. That's just the way I look at math and look at leverage. Municipal finance is a lot different than corporate finance or personal finance. In municipal finance, we don't necessarily, at least the way our finance policy is written today, we don't necessarily leverage the use of bonds or debt instruments against investments that grow better than these bond rates do. We only invest in things like CDs today that are paying us basically nothing. But in corporate finance, I'm using this as an opportunity to have a conversation coming up soon. In corporate finance or personal finance, we'd be looking at this and saying, if I have that $8 million in the bank, I can go invest in the market, which is returned somewhere around 7-8% historic. If I only have to pay 3% towards this bond, arbitrage kicks in, I win by 4% over that 30-year period. All day, we can take this deal all day long. If we're talking cash on cash decisions. In municipal finance, we're not leveraging against anything. So there's less of an argument here. I look at it strictly from a cash flow standpoint, that if we have a fixed cash flow cost for 30 years, again, 15 years from now, it feels like 200 grand. 30 years from now, it feels like $90,000. 90 grand to us right now. I don't say it's nothing, it's very easy for us to handle. We're having the same conversations about future debt obligations. And these also buy us bigger projects, which increases our debt capacity in the future as does inflation. Okay. But that's why I agree with Councilmember Kurtz's comment on $10 million. My actual comment was going to be, I'm still not, that 10 million is probably the okay number to go up to. I'm still not settled that we need to go that high. Because I think we need to talk to the facility itself and what do we need now and what should we potentially add on later or so. I'll talk to the details from number 10.
Yeah, Councilmember Person, yes, one, those comments have been added for 2 hours. You guys want to take it to a break after these 2 comments?
Thank you for the lesson, Hugh. I'm excited for the actual session. This is great. So 2 comments. I think one of the things, so Phil had asked about the payment towards the principal, that sort of thing too. And I was thinking that as well. And I can't remember who said it earlier, but someone said that we have other projects like the library, the police station, all that we're probably going to have to address over the next 30 years for sure. So I like having the lower payment in order to have the capacity to look at those projects later. And then Hugh, with what you said about $10 million, threw that out there as number 2. I really want to make sure that we're getting what we want and we've got the right scope to figure out if that's the right number.
Well, I appreciate Councilman Kurtz bringing up, jumping to a number. That's where I want to go to. And I hope we'll maybe get there. I'm looking at the number of 9 million. Because I'm thinking, I'm looking at these things are $7 million to 9 million. What I would be comfortable with is this. We pick a number, let's say it's 9. That's cash concrete. Get for 9. What don't we get for 9? Another 200,000 or 300,000 because we can have this other gingerbread. I'm extremely motivated by what do we need. Now, what we want, I want it all. I want everything that's been proposed, but it's unrealistic. It's unrealistic to pay for it, unrealistic to do it. We'd be the only one in the United States, and I'm going to go with this guy over here. He talks about above the hill. I heard that in 2016. I've never lost that comment. Let's focus on above the hill. Let's focus on a dollar amount. I like 9. And whatever it is, let's pick a number today. That's the number. What do we get for it? Not a dollar more. Because it might be that we get some of the things we think we can't get right now. But keep in mind, as Councilman Fritz said, we have the things that we're going to have to pay for in the future. But really keep in mind, we don't do well sticking to a budget. And the part just keeps driving in my brain. I still can't get over 2 years later, 2.5 million, and we've spent 4.5 or thereabouts for that part. So I'm concerned about jumping into this and how far do we go. So let's stick with the budget.
So before we break, let's get this here, still give a chance for everyone else.
You know, when we talk about amortizing over 30 years or over 20, one thing that we, you know, the excitement of doing something new, we forget what got us here. What got us here is a building that's been there for 50 years. We've been talking about it for almost 10 or more on what needs to be done. At the end of 30-year amortization, we're ready to do it all over again, folks. Okay? This is not a one-time issue. So you're talking about other projects, but you forgot to put this one back in too. So the choices are that we're gonna have to do some heavy maintenance operations over the course of the life of the building, or we're gonna be right back where we're at. So that needs to be considered as well when you talk between 20 and 30. At 20, we get a little breathing room. Okay? We build back up some of our reserves. Or it may have already been diverted to another project. So at some point, we have to say, we can't maintain any other projects. And we need our finance guy to tell us, hey, you're getting to the point where regardless whether we're built out or not, financially, we cannot maintain what we already have at the current rates of income. And I think that's a very important piece that we may as well get up to our attention and discuss and understand.
Anything else to add? Anything else is said? All right, I think that's a good thing to take a break on. 10 minutes here for everybody. All right, maybe, Chris, can you take my kind of back and said, we'll read through in 10 minutes.
We're gonna be back in 10 minutes.
What?
I'm just gonna ask a question.
Before we get back on, or we?
Oh, what's wrong?
Okay, make sure everything's back on. Video off. Okay, so just a little bit, we don't mind. Okay, welcome back. I just thought maybe I'd do a quick summary of what we talked about real quick, and then we can take the next step. So, you know, we're kind of mixing up, going back and forth a little bit with regards to the decisions we're making here, but just quick summary. It looks like we're looking at option one, and based on budget, possibly adding a couple of different things. Don't sacrifice parking. Note that the estimates that we have are dated and most likely have changed, or likely gone up at this point. We talked about how to pay for it. We've identified that there's approximately $2 million in cash that we could put towards this project, with financing the balance, noting that, again, rates are increasing. Talk about 20 years versus 30. It doesn't sound like we're real settled on that yet, so we'll keep that open. And whether or not we're going to, the decision on the budget is going to be based on the payment or the project. Kind of had a lot of back and forth on that. So it looked like we were going for a payment, and then I had at least 3 people throw out $9 to $10 million. So we'll need to kind of solidify that as well. And then Councilmember Blanford brought up a great point of, you know, if we find, you know, what are we going to do about maintenance over the 30 years? So I know we've got some great programs to manage that, but then those are the costs that we need to take into consideration. So I know Mayor Pro Tem asked for the microphone.
It's actually just a question on clarification. On budget, if we discuss this sufficiently, are we to the point where we can discuss and come up with a dollar amount of consensus we're comfortable with, that we can move forward on? I know the council mentioned 10 million. I mentioned 9. I've since changed that to 8.
And just to clarify.
Because my eyes were bigger on the, I want this, I want everything.
So, and we want to talk about the total project cost, including the 2 million.
Right, yeah. So my idea is $8 million.
2 10s and an 8.
Hey, Mark, what is your?
Yeah, sorry, thank you. There's something that I thought of during the break is our discussion so far has been, it sounds like we can afford a certain amount. 9, 10, whatever that number is, based on our previous debt service number. I guess the question I have, and it may not be able to be answered today, we just talked about it, but if we can identify it, is what portion of this project is our maximum debt service allowed? So at least we know what we have to work with for upcoming projects. And then my other comment, to follow what Mike just said on the 8 million is, is the 9 million. I was thinking 6, so there you have it.
Compromise.
There you go, customer receivers.
I'm just gonna go back to my cash flow comment that I think somewhere around 350,000 a year. Cash flow on debt service, so whatever that equals in project.
Recapitulate the cash flow basis, I'd say 350 also as a target would be appropriate.
So just as an understanding, so 350 a year puts us at total project cost, including our upfront expenditure of 9 million.
This one's way in, just try to capture the reverse.
You just answered my question, so that,
Oh,
so I wanted to know that.
Right. Right, what number are you, what numbers in your head?
So we can kind of end up at 2 million, but
Is that the number you're comfortable with? Financing need,
finance made, yes.
so 10 million.
I'm gonna stick with 9, I think. There was a topic with Chris, and I know that's an old number, but so then you have 9, but I think I'd be comfortable with 9, financing 7.
That's an 8. Okay. All right, so you want to take the average of that first one? All right, so we're between 6 and 10. I was going to look at the average here just so we can have a place to start.
I'm doing that right now.
Question for Kyle.
8.4. 2 cents.
So I didn't confuse anybody when I say 8 million, that would be 6 million refinanced because of 2 million coming in
Right, I'm looking at.
from the other.
Total.
My question to Kyle is this, is that I know it's, for us to have $2 million in there, it's taken us a period of time to get that slush fund. So let's say we draw that 2 million out. What would we have used that 2 million for? Because if it's taken us 3-4 years or whatever it is to build up that reserve, it's going to take us that many years probably to build it back up again. So what would we have used that 2 million for? Because if it's not going to be available for 2 to 3 years or 5 years, we have to realize now we have to go to general fund to take care of those things. That's a huge impact on that 2 million.
So currently, how I understand that is unassigned. And so we have reserves. And so we have a minimum reserve of 1.3. We also have another 4.5, how I understand it, just in general fund. And then we also have another 2 million in REIT between the two funds. And so we don't have just 2 million, but there's more. We're just taking what we would consider a responsible amount for jumpstarting the project. Thank you.
So, just crunching some numbers, average comfortable number was coming in at 8.4 million total. So financing 6.4. I don't know where that brings us into approximately on the debt service under 350 though, because I know you said 350 is 9 million. So somewhere like 325, I'm assuming, in there for per year for the financing debt. So at this point, I guess I'm looking for an action or a request from the council. Next steps with regards to the financing part, and then I guess we can get back to the scope of the project. So are we looking to go ahead and firm up some numbers for 8.4, and then we can look at the aspects of the project scope and see what we definitely want. If we can come in under that number, then what do we add? How do you guys want to approach this?
I think the first thing that is
So what's our motion?
I'd like to move that we adopt 8.4 budget.
The motion on the floor to adopt the 8.4 million total budget for the Trailhead project. Do I have a second?
Second.
Seconded by Councilmember Dunn. Any discussion? Not seeing any, and all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right. $8.4 million project budget is adopted. All right, I'll give this back to you for a second, Chris. Okay.
Yeah, that's up. Now we need to talk about 20 or 30 years. So for how long? Like, there's some more discussion on that. There's been, sounded like most everybody was leaning toward 30, but obviously that's going to like throw a really good plan there. I know everybody wanted to reconsider the 30 year. So if somebody want to make a motion on whichever time frame, you know, go ahead.
Madam Mayor, I want to move a 30-year target term financing and support the effort.
Okay, we had a motion and a second to vote on a 30-year financing term. Any discussion?
Just to ensure that there's a early payoff for it.
And we will, the comment was to make sure that there is an early payoff available on that 30 years. Councilman Boyer? Oh, it's not a good question.
I do, well, this comment. Okay. So if our budget is 8.4, and we're gonna put 2 million towards it, so we're gonna finance 6.4. Make any sense to revisit the 20-year? Look at the chart here that we're getting 5 million, 20 years, 309. Maybe over the 350.
All right, we have a motion. Okay.
I guess I'm wondering if we want to revisit that, we have the design scope and like, I'm thinking about this wrong, but if we can't get what we want for 8.4, not want, we need a new clubhouse, we exit option 1, right? If we can't get there, do we then need to, I don't know if I want to get locked into a 20-year, if a 30-year might help us in the long run, and what we're asking for with option 1 plus or whatever is more expensive than that. So my question makes sense?
Yeah. My thoughts on it, I'll obviously jump in. So I guess my thing, we're making decisions on the next steps. We're not approving a bond. We're not approving a term at this point. But these are, decisions to get us to the next step. Go ahead, Tim.
I guess my question is, do we need to make that decision now on what the length of term is? I know we've done the budget, so when I'm thinking what Councilman Kurtz said, I think it has some merit, possibly. Are we rushing into trying to determine the time frame? Would it be advantageous that we go to 8.4, see what that comes in at? Because it might be that it comes in less than that dollar amount. We could go towards a 20. I would prefer paying it off as soon as possible, but I certainly support the 30. I just wondered if it's premature looking at it.
Thanks. So I would suggest we get the details of the full build out finalized, and then we'll go finalize the bond or financing it. Because that will drive our figures.
For discussion purposes, though, next steps, are we okay? And does it make sense to identify a term just for as we're hoping for it? So
We can, and this is open to obviously discussion. These numbers might change once we get to a place where we're getting ready to pass a bond. So I wouldn't want council to lock themselves into something when new information may become available when it's time to pull the trigger.
The 8.4 is not going to change. It's the debt service.
So we can, if you want to, you know, at this point next week, the motion can be withdrawn if we want to do that. If you guys want to make that decision later.
Was it actually seconded?
Yeah.
Oh, okay, I didn't hear it. Thank you.
Okay,
Second.
there's a motion and second to rescind the motion. Any discussion? All in favor of rescinding the motion to determine the term, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, so we're gonna take.
Sorry, I keep breaking my rule. So, the motion to, decide on a term has been rescinded. So as we get further along in the project and closer to financing, the council will discuss that further. Take that off. Katie, I think we can talk about if I will turn this over to you now to kind of walk through the schedule, and then we can get back to some more scope.
Thank you, Mayor. So, to manage expectations, I wanted to share with you kind of, if we leave this meeting today with a go-forward plan of an $8.4 million project with a $2 million down payment, the remainder to be debt financed. Carla's going to do a lot of work with the financing arm. And then Chris and I are going to do a lot of work trying to find somebody to select to do the design and the estimate. And that takes, let me start at the end. This is probably a 30 to 36 month project, okay? What happens in the public sector, it takes us a couple months to find someone, negotiate a contract, and bring it back to council. And then the person has to do the work, the design development, estimating and all that, bring it back to council. And then we go out to bid, and then the contractor builds it. The good news is that there's a lot of vertical construction, and this is not complicated construction. So the weather, I don't think is gonna have a huge impact on this project. But once you award the contract, it's probably still about 12 months minimum. That's what my gut is telling me, Phil. You know different? I mean, probably more, yeah. 12 to 15 months. And if the economy doesn't sustain this level, that's a good thing, because there'll probably be a lot of other contractors that want to use this project. But anyway, so just to manage expectations, I would say a year from now, we would have complete design documents, and hopefully we're bidding. And then 12 to 18 months after that, we'd be eating dinner and dancing.
Yeah, but where?
And hitting balls, how's that? So this is a 30 to 36 month effort.
So I guess my question back to financing then, how can you walk us through how that works with regards to when we go out for the bond and when we have to start spending it and all that?
So that'll all be information for council to consider when we pass the actual bond. They normally have drawdown requirements, and they have a end date on here's when the last amount of money has to be taken out. But we will have that worked out. We'll have the schedule finalized before that document is in front of you for passage.
I remember in the past, we've talked about being able to spend certain money, but we are putting the $2 million advance, so that helps. But with regards to, we can pay ourselves back on some of those expenses that we laid the money out on, if I remember correctly.
Question, 30 to 36 months, is that what we run it? Is there any action we need to take right now regarding the driving range net? Given that time frame?
I'll do it right now.
Answer was no.
I have just a comment. I think the answer is no, but I'm gonna ask it anyway. Is any of this project, do you think COVID American Rescue Plan eligible? So we have our eyes open, I'm just gonna mention that, okay? We have our eyes open, perhaps, I'm thinking job creation, I'm thinking system improvements, I'm thinking environmental, efficiencies of the building, I'm thinking a lot of things. So I'm just throwing that out as, that's there, hopefully to bring, not to add more dollars to 8.4, but to take down the contribution. The other thing is that, Chris, if we were going to start, Mayor, if we were going to start on this project Monday, I don't have anything in the budget funded to hire a project overseer, I don't want to call him a project manager, someone to manage the project. And I can tell you Lisa's crew is tapped out. And so Chris and I will have to get together and figure out who's going to manage this design development. And then also we would have to select an architect / designer.
One more point. You actually need a budget amendment to even put money into the design piece.
Okay.
Kyle, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think the money that we have left over, I think we have some funds left over we didn't spend on the design. But I think also in the fund, there's a particular fund, I think we have an excess $200,000, or is it $300,000 we have in the fund where we tapped into the money for the design so far?
Well, I think I'll have that.
I think that was last year, Mayor Pro Tem.
There was 100,000, I think we spent about 96,000.
Right.
And that was in a different budget year, so we have no money budgeted for design.
So we didn't carry that over into this year, last year's budget?
That's correct.
Okay. So we'll need to correct that. Thank you.
So with that schedule, we've got.
We've got a budget, 8.4 million, we're looking at a schedule 30 to 36 months. Are any of the aspects of the project, American Rescue Plan eligible? Acknowledging that will add to the money we spend, it'll just help pay for part of what we're doing. And then we're looking at a budget amendment to get the project started. So we're back to scope. We talked about, option one, and then seeing what that is, and then seeing what we can afford on top of that. So how much of a budget amendment are we looking at needing? I'm sure you guys might need some time to crunch those numbers.
Yeah, we'll work on that next week. I'll work with Lisa and we'll bring forward a budget amendment for an estimate of what the architect will cost.
That's next meeting.
The next meeting is May 18th. We should be able to have an estimate.
So planning for the next meeting to have a budget estimate for the budget amendment. And if you guys run into any roadblockers, just let us know, okay, it'd be great to be able to move on this.
So the way we generally scope this. So generally speaking, design is breaking into thirds. So you go 0 to 30% gets us a concept and a budget. Then 30 to 60 narrows in the design details. And then to 90%, you start getting the biddable documents. So it's kind of broken into those phases, and you structure your contract to do it in those phases. I will bring back the 100%, but know that we manage it in thirds. So there's check-ins 3 times before it goes out to bid.
Question or discussion?
Yeah.
I don't know who best to answer, but during this process of design, can somebody speak to how we get input from council, from our citizens, from anybody that wants to give us their 2 cents? How does that work?
it can work any way that you want. So just as an idea, Councilmember Foyer, if the council wants input first to identify some details and then go out to the community and ask for their input on what you guys are thinking. So we have this idea, give us feedback on that. I struggle going to the community and saying, what do you want? And then getting feedback on things that we don't have prices on, the project can't facilitate it and all that. What I like is the council to do their due diligence at the front end, narrow it down, and then go to the community and have an open house and say, hey, we've got some ideas here, or a Zoom meeting or whatever, and then have a farmer's market and say, hey, do you like this one or do you like this one? And I think then the comment is more meaningful and we can use it. So does that make sense to you?
Can I just ask a question?
Yeah. So I think you guys are in the driver's seat and then we develop it and then we get feedback on your ideas from the community.
If we take that approach, Katie, I would suggest that we have a 10% check-in also, where they do the conceptual, we get feedback before they get into the design per se.
I'm really cautionary to suddenly get the community involved in this again, because we've been that route. And they had 7 meetings where we asked different people of the citizens to come forward. And out of that did not come what we have today. What we have today is what the company that designed it said, this is what we envision, how do you like this? I think that we've made a decision today that it's 1. If we go to study the citizens, well, here's 1, but by the way, there's 2, and maybe we can incorporate 3. Now it's becoming anti-productive. I would certainly be comfortable with, this is what we have, this is our budget, this is what we can get for the budget, and this is what we're moving forward on. What do you think?
Yeah,
So the note I took was get feedback on our proposal and concept as it's been discussed today, not a free-for-all. Hey, everybody, farmer's market, what do you want to see in this? Because we're past that point.
I'm just gonna reiterate the exact same point. So that we've been through a lot of citizen input over the last 5 years on this, and we're at a point that citizen input is great on what color you want on the outside, but not, I don't think maybe Lisa, the question maybe is for you. Do we need a 10% check-in, checkpoint on design concepts? I think we're past design concepts. Now this is what we're doing. What do you? How does that?
I would say that as they work on the 30%, if we're running into budget issues based upon the direction we got today, that we may schedule a workshop with you sooner than 30%. But if not, we would come back at 30% and pause to share that with the public and get a thumbs up, thumbs down kind of feedback.
So I'm gonna make a comment. It's kind of related to Orchard Park and Councilmember Kennedy's comments about what happened at Orchard Park, which was, if my memory serves, there was a budget that was being driven towards, which dramatically changed scope on the project based on how our current city engineer at that time saw the project. And so through some of that design process, we're trying to drive towards a budget. Then it turns out, well, actually that didn't include all the things we really wanted. Then we come back and forth. So I don't really agree with how Councilmember Kennedy worded that I don't think we're over budget. The scope was dramatically changed during the design process because that engineer left out very important parts of that project. So I don't know how we avoid that mistake. This is a bigger project than that. I don't want to get halfway through or to 30% and find out that 8.4 turns out doesn't cover half the building that you want. That's what I want to avoid somehow.
And that's why my suggestion, we're trying to fight the scope and budget. And as we're working on the scope, if we see early on that we're going to miss the mark on the budget, we need to come back to it.
So that for the benefit of the audience and the rest of the council, Lisa said exactly correct. Bringing back scope without a price tag on it is not good for you, and it's not good for the project. So when we have to be at a point, which is generally about 30%, when we can bring back cost and scope, then you can see what you get and what it's going to cost, the estimate. And remember, you hear this word contingency or whatever, there tends to be a design contingency or a construction contingency to manage little things that come up that need to be addressed, but it's not, those contingencies are not for budget overruns, nor are they for extra scope. So I hope that's not too complicated, but the bottom line is you have to put scope and design development together.
Yeah. We've really covered everything we intend to do. We've got the project, we've got the budget. We talked about how we're going to pay for it and the schedule. Anything else for, go ahead, Councilmember Kurtz.
No, when we'll talk about this, but as far as like the design of the restaurant, the feel of the restaurant, are we going for a high-end restaurant? Are we going for a Shake Shack? Are we like, when do we talk about those things to figure out what sort of design we need to do for that? And then when are we gonna also talk about the add-ons and what we want, don't want, so we know how much those are?
Question. Government and restaurants don't always go hand in hand, okay? What works best, in my experience, is that the government builds a cold shell. That means we put in the walls, the plumbing, the electrical. You enter into an agreement with a restaurant that wants to be there, and they do what they call TIs, tenant improvements. They put in the dishwashers, the tables, the booths, so I said, and those kinds of things. The colors are right, the carpet, the tile, whatever. And then in the negotiation of their rental agreement, I want to turn over to Chris because he's managed restaurants more than I have. But in your negotiation of their lease, then you decide how much of that they own, how much of it you own, and all that. So the good news is we don't have to design a restaurant. The restaurant person, they would much rather design it than us.
Yeah, just a short thing. So as far as really all we would do is decide what square footage we're comfortable with building. And then we would go out for like an RFP to restaurateurs and say, okay, this is what we're gonna do. This is what we would pay for. This is what we're thinking. They would come to us with, what they would want to pay, how they would want to pay for it. If they want, if the city paid for everything inside, then they're going to have to pay more in rent or more a percentage of what their gross sales are, or whatever. All of that's negotiated, but all it is figuring out a bottom line of what the city wants as their net, net gain at the end of the month, at the end of the year. That makes sense.
Actually, you decide which type of restaurant you want, because
Right.
you guys are the ones
Yeah,
that
like
select.
McDonald's says we want to go in there versus like.
Expensive.
Correct.
Examples, like I wondered when.
Correct. So if you had 7 different restaurants come in and one was Olive Garden and another one was, I'm just throwing out names, you know what I mean? Or McDonald's, like I said, yes, you would have the decision of, well, that's not what we're for.
All right, so. Okay, so it looks like we've hit all of our retreat goals. So I guess we are at the following actions. So we will have estimated budget amendment dollars at the next meeting on the 18th. And then we'll go from there. And I think we're in pretty good shape. I guess at this point, if the council doesn't have anything more to input, we will go to citizen comments. None? Give that a little bit more time to simmer. We've got quite a few people attending from the public. So we're hoping maybe somebody might want to chime in. Just send Todd Henderson a chat in the chat feature on Zoom. And of course, we always have citizen comments during our regular meetings at the beginning and the end. So feel free to digest this information and come back to us at one of the future council members with some feedback. Nothing?
Okay.
Okay. All right, we have no citizen comments. One more round for the council or staff. If you guys have any other additional comments, if not, we're going to be getting out of here a lot earlier than we thought. Great discussion, everybody. I think we're on a really good path. All right, motion to adjourn. Motion second. All right. Have a good weekend, everybody. Thanks for attending, everybody.